This week we watched Civil War.
There is like so much like potential for like a good movie hidden in this. To me, like I did not really enjoy it that much. Like the visual spectacle of it was amazing, typical Alex Garland. But it felt like I was eating like a rice cake for weight loss. It was like really empty calories. Like the movie for me lacked a lot of substance and polish. It's like basically a cursory version of a person trying to understand the American political spectrum and American history at the same time. Kirsten Dunst's character, which I think she did had an amazing performance. You know, in the beginning when she's talking to the older man, she's like, all these countries I toured doing war photos, I never thought it'd be here. I thought my art, was a cautionary tale and stuff like that. And the worst part is this being the backdrop of journalists observing and experiencing war and not really being active participants in it, and either like which side they agree on or whatever. It's sad because we see what's going on in the Middle East right now with Palestinian journalists are being slain left and right, just trying to get the story out of their people. Whereas in contrast, you see Kirsten Dunst and her team, they're just hunting for the money shot, which is the president. I feel like there was so much more this movie could have been, and it was like a Cliff Notes version of what it could be. It's supposed to be his version, even though Apocalypse Now or Full Metal Jacket, but it doesn't hit those political points or actually has a message like those movies do.
I actually like this film. War is very damaging. And I think by just kind of shooting it and kind of seeing the different elements, you have some places where people are just vigilantes and like taking things into their own hands and doing absolute madness. And then you have a refugee camp, like just in the middle of the city. And then you have entire towns that seem completely unaffected by what's happening because they're just choosing not to get involved and trying to be neutral. So I think you can kind of see what war can do. I was very invested in the characters, and I thought that was a good grounding spot. And especially Kirsten Dunst's character of Lee, she was very kind of desensitized to all of the violence that she had witnessed over her career. But at a certain point, when a young person is now involved in what she's doing and is like basically a mini her, she has to reflect. I feel like it's a reflection, and it's an uncomfortable reflection of like, oh, I guess I didn't realize how much risk I was taking. I didn't realize how dangerous the situations were. And I don't want someone else to be put in that position. And that makes her, especially towards the end, kind of fall apart a little bit. And that you can see the impact of what this kind of job would do to somebody. Like, I don't feel like you can completely be shut off from these type of things.
It's kind of a weird switch because it happens like really abruptly. Like she's like has a very nihilistic point of view due to her experience of going to other countries and witnessing war. But then it's like I can understand as a person the slow progression of I meet the girl, then we're on this journey. Hey, we're taking shots from like a random golf course. I'm just gonna lie down on the grass and chill. I thought that was odd. And then going now, we're gonna the girl left. We gotta get her. And then I just saw Sammy die and other people die, and it shows a breakdown there. Like those 2 points kind of should have been the breaking point. But then you finally see the breakdown when she's about to get her money shot of potentially getting the president, and it has like a weird inversion of her and Jesse's characters in a way, like you're past the passion torch moment you're kind of mentioning.
Someone else said that too, and I don't think that's true. I feel like in the beginning of the movie, when she's in the hotel taking a bath, she's having all of those flashbacks of being at war.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another moment where they're in the dress shop and she tries on the dress and she's like, wow, I haven't seen myself in such a long time. I feel like there are little moments that aren't like explicitly like, this is a really serious thing and this should cause you to have a breakdown, like cause and effect. Like if this happens and you react that way, I feel like it was a slow build. Like once we got to DC and we were outside of the White House and she has that moment where it's like all starting to fall in on her, I believed it because I was like, I can see from back then when you were in New York, like I can already tell like this is not working out for you. Like you're starting to feel the effects. And I think maybe it's more so like because it's your home, like it's in the US, you probably never thought that this type of thing would happen here. And also because like you have a young person who you're now kind of in charge of looking out for. So all of that stuff is starting to pick at you, unwind you. It's like I believed the switch when it happened. Now, other people probably are going to read it differently, but like from the signs that I was seeing in the film, I was like, yeah, I can totally understand like how she would get to a point where even in the last moment she would sort of sacrifice herself for someone else, which I don't think she probably would have done before.
I understand, like, Alex Garland was like, oh, this movie is a cautionary tale of X, Y, and Z. But when you have the people involved not really acknowledging those cautionary issues or problems, is kind of weird. I really think this movie probably would have been a lot better had they focused in on like the civilians and their experiences with this. The moment where you see Jesse Plemons, Kirsten Dunst's husband, show up as a soldier and they're killing civilians indiscriminately and they're burying them, about to burn their grave. And it hits the point where they're like, oh, we're Americans. And his question is, what kind of Americans are you? And you can kind of see that subtle racism within that dialogue when they're talking to Joel, who is played by Wagner Moore, and they're like, Central American or South American. And you see the process in Joel, like, what are you talking about? And then it hits him like, oh, I'm from Florida. And then he goes on, where are you from? Missouri. Where are you from? Colorado. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Y'all's Americans. And then he goes to the two people from Hong Kong, and he shoots them. Like, it really hits on like the subtle racism of that environment and situation at that time.
That was the most terrifying scene of the entire movie, and I would argue the best. Yeah. Like that whole sequence was just really, really good in terms of like direction and performances. Because it first starts, it's like, okay, well, what are these goons doing? And then also because, and I will say this is one of the criticisms I have of this movie, they don't really make it clear like who is fighting who. Yeah. Like you have the California and Texas thing, but you also have a Southern rebellion, and then you have the states that are kind of neutral, but like they don't really explain like who is who and like how can we differentiate between any of these groups, because most of them are like in military gear. So it's like, how do I know who these people are? So he should have did a better job at explaining that. But anyways, in terms of this scene, I was like, okay, so what are they doing? Like, I guess, are they a part of the army? Like, who are they? The rebellion? They're just some dudes. Like, they're just some dudes. They're just some straight up racist dudes who are just killing people who they don't feel belong to this country. And that whole scene was like crazy because, we meet those two other people maybe 2 minutes before the scene happens. And yet I felt like so scared for them. Like I was already like invested in like, oh God, what's going to happen to them? And it starts off very quiet, like when he's asking the questions about like, where are you from and all of those things. And then it gets so loud. Like once they kill the other friend, Jesse starts screaming and everyone just starts like absolutely losing their mind because they're like, okay, well, we're all going to die here. Like, and I was like, oh, all you're about to die here. Like then Jesse falling into the pit of the dead bodies. And oh God, that was just so disturbing. And them just like screaming, but it's completely silent in the car. All of that was really good to me. I was like all of that provoked a lot of emotion. And I felt like that is probably the most cautionary thing of like how when you're sowing in so much division, that's where it leads. It leads to people taking things into their own hands and then just killing people indiscriminately.
It's not lost to me that it's a black person that saves the four of those idiots, because for years, for decades, black people, honestly, because we've faced the most discriminatory actions other than probably Native Americans, so that we've been basically constantly been a canary in a coal mine whenever these issues pop up.
I think one of the things is that like this is an A24 film, right? So, but this is like the first like really big budget A24 film that I think they've made. Yeah, it was like $50 million in terms of the budget, I think. It's a question of like, how do you bridge kind of what you're known for, which is like the indie character study, like intimate depictions of people with a big budget kind of spectacle thing. Like, can you actually make the transition to do it? Or can you like juggle both? And I think that's what Civil War really was. It was like a question of like, okay, can A24 do something like this? And I guess the jury's still out. I mean, people are very like divided about like how they feel about this movie. Like some people really don't like it, and some people really like it.
This movie, he doesn't really give a viewpoint. He doesn't really say anything,
Right.
And that's my issue. Ex Machina, he gave you the pros of AI revolution and stuff like that. What is considered human life, blah blah blah. The robot actually wanting self-determination, all those things are there, so you get all different viewpoints and you come to your own. For him to say the movie is a cautionary tale with a message, you don't get a viewpoint to say, all right, what's the message I need to reach? It doesn't really go in a direction for you to try and do that.
I will say that like the end, like the very, very end of it, where I think they're going to credits and there's a photo of the soldiers taking the picture with the dead president corpse kind of laying there. That really reminded me of the photos that came out of Guantanamo Bay with the soldiers who were like having the the inmates on leashes and stuff and smiling at the camera. Like that's what happens when you feel like you are justified in your cause and you can kind of just do anything to anyone. Like it's that.
Yeah.
Or whatever values that you're trying to fight for lead you to that place. And like we're already seeing it. We've already seen it during the war on terror. We're seeing it now with the war in Gaza. Like that's kind of obvious to us, but I feel like for me that was the message. This is why war is terrible, because it not only damages entire communities and people's lives, but it also like takes away your humanity.
The movie's not all bad. Like I said, I love the cinematography from Rob Hardy. They're freaking collaborators. I loved it.
Yeah, I thought the music choices were interesting too. Like they would have really like good music over like the most horrifying images. I was like, yeah.
And I did enjoy that because the song choice, a lot of those folk songs that came out, during Vietnam and stuff, a lot of those folk songs are really anti-war songs, and I love their inclusion in this. To still illustrate when all those bad moments are happening, when they're raiding a building or even the White House, or when they make it to the military camp, all those, folk songs are playing. There are good things about this movie. The movie's not all bad, I do wish Alex
liked it. I thought it was all right. I thought it was all right.
I think Alex, he could have did better. Like there's stuff there that make a good movie. He just and to me, he just dropped the ball in a lot of certain areas. Did you like that clip? Well, you can listen to the entire podcast because the 16mm Film Crew podcast is available on all major podcast platforms.